Arrival on campus and initial impact ***. When I arrived at the university, my heart was racing with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Everything seemed perfect. The campus was bustling with energy, and the modern, vibrant dormitory looked like it had been pulled straight from a college brochure. I could hardly wait to settle in and start this new chapter of my life. As soon as I stepped into the dorm, I was greeted by Emma, my roommate. She flashed a warm, friendly smile and welcomed me with a cheerful tone. At first glance, Emma seemed like the ideal roommate, easy to talk to and genuinely nice. We hit it off right away, chatting about our classes, our hopes for the semester, and the little quirks of dorm life. I was relieved to find someone I could click with so easily. But as the days went by, I started to notice little things that gave me pause. Emma had these odd ways of speaking, and sometimes she'd get this faraway look in her eyes, as if she were somewhere else entirely. I brushed off my growing unease, attributing it to my own nerves and the stress of starting college. I figured it was just part of the adjustment period, a normal part of settling into a new environment. Even so, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was something a little off about Emma. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination running wild, but I couldn't help feeling that there was more to her behavior than met the eye. The nightmare unfolds ***. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's behavior began to unravel in ways that I couldn't ignore. It started with small, unsettling incidents. She would suddenly lash out in anger over the most trivial things, and her outbursts seemed completely unprovoked. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking she was just stressed or adjusting poorly. But then things began to get even stranger. Emma started talking to people who weren't there. I'd catch her having long conversations with empty space, her eyes fixed on some invisible figure. She'd argue and plead with these unseen entities as if they were real. Watching her, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't know how. My instinct was to stay quiet, to avoid escalating things further. Every time I tried to approach her about her behavior, she'd either become defensive or completely shut down. One night, I came back to our room after a study session to find that my personal belongings had been moved around. My textbooks were strewn across the floor, and my notebooks were piled in a haphazard stack. It was as if someone had rummaged through my things in a frantic search. I tried to tell myself it was just a mistake, but then I started finding strange, threatening messages left in my room, scrawled on scraps of paper and hidden in places I would never think to look. Get out before it's too late. She won't let you leave. My heart pounded with every new discovery, and my rational mind struggled to find a logical explanation. Was I losing my grip on reality? My anxiety only grew as I started to question my own sanity. I felt trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Desperate for answers, I decided to dig into Emma's past. What I uncovered was even more horrifying than I had imagined. Emma had been involved in a series of sinister events at her previous campus, rumors of an unexplained disappearance and whispers of a malevolent presence that had haunted her dorm. The more I read, the clearer it became that something dark and dangerous had followed her here. I knew I had to act fast. The feeling of impending doom was suffocating, and I could sense that whatever was happening was escalating quickly. Emma was no longer just a strange roommate. She was the gateway to something far more sinister, confrontation and resolution ***. The more I delved into Emma's past, the clearer it became that something supernatural was at play. I learned that Emma had been the victim of a haunting that seemed to follow her wherever she went. The stories spoke of a dark presence that manipulated her, driving her to madness. My heart sank as I realized that this same entity was now targeting me as well. It started subtly at first, whispers in the dark, a cold chill that seemed to follow me everywhere. But soon, the malevolent presence grew bolder. Objects in my room began to move on their own, and I started hearing my name being called in eerie, disembodied voices. My once safe haven felt like a trap, and I could no longer distinguish between reality and nightmare. Desperate to escape, I began making plans to leave the dormitory, but every attempt was thwarted. The presence seemed to anticipate my every move, creating obstacles that made escape almost impossible. Doors wouldn't open, my phone died without warning, and the dormitory hallways twisted into nightmarish labyrinths. I was trapped, and the fear was suffocating. One night, as the oppressive darkness settled over the campus, the presence finally revealed itself. I was alone in the room when the atmosphere thickened with a palpable sense of dread. Shadows on the walls began to writhe and twist, and a deep, guttural voice echoed through the room, taunting me with threats and promises of suffering. I confronted Emma, who was now fully consumed by the entity. Her eyes were hollow, and she spoke in a voice that was not her own. I could see the anguish in her eyes, the silent plea for help. The confrontation was horrifying. The presence lashed out with a ferocity I had never imagined, its anger directed at both Emma and me. In a desperate bid to break free, I gathered all my courage and faced the entity head-on. I challenged it, demanding to know what it wanted and why it had chosen us. The presence revealed its hunger for fear and despair, feeding off the chaos it created. It was a dark spirit bound by hatred and seeking to spread its torment. With a final, desperate effort, I managed to use the knowledge I had gained from my research to perform a makeshift exorcism. The ritual was far from perfect, but it seemed to weaken the presence enough to allow Emma and me to escape. As I fled the dormitory, I could feel the oppressive weight of the entity lifting, but the experience left a permanent scar on my psyche. The aftermath was a blend of relief and trauma. I had survived, but the memories of the terror and the darkness that had engulfed us would never fully fade. Emma and I went our separate ways, haunted by the events that had unfolded. For me, the experience was a stark reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown horrors that lie beyond. I left the dormitory behind, but the echoes of that night still linger in my mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can creep into the most unexpected places. The nighttime exploration ****. My friends and I had been eagerly anticipating this adventure for weeks. We'd heard so many stories about the university campus, its Gothic architecture, the old library, and the century-old dormitories. The idea of exploring these historic buildings at night seemed like the perfect way to kick off the semester with a bit of excitement. We arrived just as the sun was setting, and the campus took on an entirely different character in the twilight. The Gothic spires of the old library looked even more imposing in the dim light, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in the darkness. The dormitories, with their ancient brickwork and ivy-clad walls, felt like they were straight out of a horror movie. It was thrilling and a little unsettling all at once. At first, everything seemed perfect. We wandered through the campus, marveling at the eerie beauty of the old buildings. We joked and laughed, feeling a rush of exhilaration as we explored every corner. The night air was crisp, and the silence around us was only occasionally broken by our footsteps and the distant hum of the city. But as we ventured deeper into the campus, the atmosphere started to shift. It was subtle at first, creaking doors that seemed to groan under the weight of the years, inexplicable noises that we couldn't quite place. I noticed a chill in the air, and every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. The others seemed to feel it too. Their laughter grew more subdued, and the playful banter gave way to a nervous energy. We tried to brush off the odd occurrences, attributing them to the old buildings settling or our imagination running wild. Despite our attempts to keep the mood light, the feeling of unease grew stronger with each step we took. It was as if the campus itself was watching us, waiting for something to happen. The nightmare unfolds ***. As we made our way through the darkened corridors of the old library, we were mesmerized by its eerie charm. The rows of ancient books and the towering shelves seemed to hold secrets from another era. We had just begun to explore the dimly lit aisles when things started to go horribly wrong. It began with a strange sensation, a cold draft that seemed to swirl around us, even though the air was still. Then, with a start, we watched in disbelief as books began to shift on their own. It was as if an invisible hand was rearranging them. The soft rustling of pages turning echoed through the silence, mingling with whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. The shadows cast by the flickering light of our flashlights began to stretch and writhe, taking on shapes that seemed almost alive. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that something was deeply wrong. The once fascinating library now felt like a labyrinth of dread. We tried to convince ourselves it was just our nerves getting the best of us, but the eerie occurrences only grew more intense. One by one, we started experiencing terrifying visions. I saw fleeting glimpses of figures moving just out of reach, their faces obscured and their forms shifting like smoke. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed to amplify, turning into deafening crashes that echoed through the darkness. I could feel eyes watching us, a suffocating presence that seemed to follow our every move. Panic set in as we tried to make sense of what was happening. We huddled together, trying to calm each other down, when we stumbled upon something that sent chills through us all, a collection of old records and newspaper clippings detailing a horrific event from the campus's past. There had been a fire, a devastating blaze that had claimed the lives of several students. The more we read, the clearer it became that the fire had left a dark and malignant mark on the campus, and it seemed that this mark had awakened something malevolent. The realization that we were not just dealing with a series of creepy coincidences, but with a deep-rooted tragedy that had scarred the very grounds we were exploring made the situation even more terrifying. We knew we had to get out, but the sense of dread and the strange occurrences only seemed to tighten their grip on us. The nightmare was far from over, and it was clear that whatever was haunting the campus was far from ready to let us leave. Confrontation and escape ***. The atmosphere in the old library grew increasingly oppressive. The ghostly presence that had been lurking in the shadows now became aggressively hostile. As we moved through the dimly lit aisles, the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The apparitions that had previously been fleeting now materialized in terrifying forms, pale, ghostly figures with hollow eyes that stared at us with a chilling intensity. Our group's fear quickly turned into panic as the supernatural phenomena escalated. Objects began to fly across the room, and the temperature plummeted, turning our breaths into icy clouds. The whispers we had heard earlier turned into anguished wails that reverberated through the library, and the shadows twisted and contorted into grotesque shapes that lunged at us from every corner. The presence was no longer just watching us, it was actively trying to terrorize us. Desperate to understand what was happening and to find a way to escape, we frantically searched through old documents and historical accounts. We combed through records of the fire and the tragic deaths, piecing together fragmented stories and rumors. It became clear that the spirit haunting the campus was the vengeful ghost of one of the victims, a spirit bound by rage and sorrow, seeking to relive its suffering through anyone who dared to enter its domain. In our frantic quest for answers, we discovered a possible way to appease the restless spirits. There was a ritual mentioned in an old journal that might offer some respite. With our nerves frayed and the ghostly attacks growing more violent, we decided to perform the ritual despite our growing fear. The climax came as we prepared to perform the ritual in the heart of the library. The presence erupted into a full-blown rage, manifesting in a terrifying display of supernatural fury. The air crackled with energy, and the library seemed to warp and twist around us. The apparitions closed in, their mournful cries mingling with the roars of the malevolent force. With trembling hands and racing hearts, we completed the ritual. The process felt interminable, each moment fraught with a sense of impending doom. As we finished, a blinding light filled the library, and the oppressive presence seemed to dissipate. The shadows receded, and the temperature slowly returned to normal. Exhausted and traumatized, we made our way out of the campus. The experience had left deep scars on each of us, both physically and emotionally. We were forever changed by the terror we had faced, and the bonds of our friendship were tested to their limits. As we left the campus behind, we knew that the memories of that night would haunt us forever. The campus, with its dark history and supernatural forces, would remain a chilling reminder of the night we confronted the darkness and barely escaped with our lives. The study retreat ***. During this intense period of preparing for my final exams, I found myself desperately needing a sanctuary. As a graduate student, the pressure was overwhelming, and I needed a place where I could immerse myself in my studies without distractions. The university library seemed like the perfect refuge. Its reputation for a vast collection and tranquil atmosphere promised exactly what I needed. When I first stepped into the library late that evening, it felt like a hidden haven. The towering shelves seemed to reach up to the high, vaulted ceiling, and the dim, warm lighting cast long shadows across the room. I found a secluded corner where the soft glow of my desk lamp provided a personal island of light amidst the surrounding darkness. The quiet was almost palpable, a comforting silence that allowed me to focus on my work. It was as if the library was cocooning me in its peaceful embrace, and I felt a deep sense of calm and determination wash over me. As I spent more nights in this sanctuary, working late into the early hours, I began to sense something unusual. The darkness outside the library windows grew deeper, and the quiet seemed to shift in a way I couldn't quite explain. I started to notice peculiar things. Books on the shelves appeared to shift ever so slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. Occasionally, I would hear faint whispers that seemed to float through the air, just beyond the edge of my hearing. At first, I chalked these up to the exhaustion and stress from my studies. I told myself it was nothing more than the product of a tired mind, desperate for some semblance of rest. The enigmatic book ***. One night, as I was searching through the library's archives for a reference book, my curiosity was piqued by a hidden corner of the stacks I had never explored before. Nestled behind dust-covered volumes and forgotten manuscripts, I found an old, ornate tome. Its cover was unlike anything I had seen, deeply embossed with strange symbols and intricate designs that seemed to shift and shimmer faintly in the dim light. There was something almost magnetic about the book, as if it was calling out to me. I couldn't resist the pull. I pulled the tome from its resting place and gingerly opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, and the text was written in a language that seemed both familiar and foreign. As I began to read, I felt a strange sensation, like a cold draft sweeping through the room despite the library's stillness. The deeper I delved into the book, the more unsettling my experience became. I was soon engulfed by disturbing visions. Dark, shadowy figures danced at the edge of my vision, their forms writhing and shifting in the darkness. I saw scenes of tragic events, sorrowful and eerie, as if the book itself was unfolding the tragic history of its past. The book seemed to have a sinister influence, pulling me further into its malevolent grasp with each page I turned. The visions escalated into horrifying encounters. Ghostly figures began to manifest around me, lost souls of former students who once roamed these very halls. Their spectral forms were pale and indistinct, yet their eyes were filled with a haunting despair. They reached out towards me, their voices a mournful chorus pleading for release. As these encounters grew more intense, their presence became increasingly aggressive. The spectral figures seemed to grow more desperate and menacing, their whispers turning into anguished cries that filled the library with an oppressive dread. The library, once a haven of tranquility, now felt like a prison of shadows and whispers. The book's dark influence was drawing me into a terrifying reality, and I felt trapped between the realms of the living and the dead, struggling to understand what was happening and why I was becoming so entangled in its sinister history. Confrontation and escape ****. The library's once familiar aisles now felt like a labyrinth of terror. The shadows seemed to writhe and pulse with malevolent energy, and the whispers of lost souls grew louder and more desperate. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred as I struggled to confront the horrors that had emerged from the library's darkest corners. Every corner I turned seemed to harbor something sinister. The ghostly figures grew more aggressive, their spectral forms distorting and lunging at me with an almost palpable rage. The air felt thick and suffocating, and the once calm library was now a battleground of fear and anguish. I could hardly tell where the physical world ended and the realm of the supernatural began. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, and the oppressive atmosphere threatened to overwhelm me. Desperate to protect my sanity and escape this nightmare, I threw myself into researching the library's history and ancient texts. I combed through old records, hoping to find something, anything, that could help me break the curse. Each moment spent in the library's archives felt like a race against time, as the dark forces grew more insistent. I discovered fragmented accounts of the library's past, revealing tales of students who had vanished or been driven mad by the library's malevolent influence. One account mentioned an ancient ritual that might appease the restless spirits and lift the curse. With renewed determination, I prepared to perform the ritual described in the old texts. The library's atmosphere grew increasingly hostile as I gathered the necessary items and followed the ritual's instructions. The process was fraught with peril. The library seemed to fight against every step I took. Books flew off the shelves, and shadowy figures converged on me, their mournful cries reaching a fever pitch. The climax of the ordeal was nothing short of harrowing. As I completed the final steps of the ritual, the library erupted in a cacophony of supernatural fury. The air crackled with energy, and the ghostly figures became more agitated, their forms twisting and writhing with intense anger. I could feel the weight of the malevolent presence pressing down on me, nearly suffocating me with its dark power. With every ounce of strength I had left, I completed the ritual. A blinding light filled the library, pushing back the shadows and calming the furious apparitions. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the spectral figures slowly faded into the darkness. Exhausted and shaken, I fled the library, leaving behind the cursed tome that had ensnared me. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I was forever changed by the ordeal. The library, with its dark history and supernatural forces, had left a permanent mark on me. The knowledge of the dark forces I had barely escaped haunted me, a chilling reminder of the night I faced the darkness and survived.